So today, the task at hand is knocking out a bunch of projects on the old K-Swap Cefiro build. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with this project, it's a Nissan Cefiro, which is a four-door right-hand drive car, basically an S chassis suspension-wise. And we've put this K24 A2 in, we did a built head on it, turbo. It should make like 450 to 500 wheel. And the goal for this car is the ultimate street drift car. Basically, taking it back to the early days of drifting for me. You know, drifting has become a different thing than it was then. You know, I've got a caged car, making 500 wheel and go to competitions. This is the simpler version of that. This is a car I could street drive to Mexico and do some drifting, street drive to events with tires in the trunk. A fun, comfortable street car that I wouldn't mind daily driving around, but that also drifts really well. So anyway, that's the build plan. That's the purpose of this car, and we were cruising right along. We were getting real close to finishing this thing up. We've got just about everything we need to do it, and we're just doing it. That is the key. So today things are a little different though. If you're a regular visitor of the shop here and you come hang out for projects often, you know that normally you are here for the beginning of the project and you hang out through the whole project and you watch all the intricacies of the project and see everything being built firsthand. This time's a little different. It's a little different. You showed up late. You showed up late, but it's my fault. It's my fault. So, yeah, my main camera here, I accidentally pressed a button and formatted my entire SD card and deleted 2.5 to 3 days worth of footage. All gone. All of it. So, before we get started on the work that we have to do, that we still have left to do, I'm going to walk you guys back through all the stuff we've already done, because we've gotten some really cool stuff done that I'm really proud of and excited about. And you should have seen it, but you didn't see it because you showed up late. So, since you're here now, we'll walk through it. I'll show you what we got going on. So where we left off last time was radiator mounting. I built these brackets to go on the end tanks of the radiator, and we need to build from here to the chassis. But before I finalized the mounting position of the radiator, I wanted to get the fans on. We're running some beefy Mishimoto race fans, and I want to make sure that clearance all around here to all of this stuff is good before I commit to mounting the radiator. So to help with that, I got the Swag Off-Road press brake. So this is a finger brake. We can kind of move these fingers around if we need to bend just one spot. We got this tight radius plate that they sell as well to put on here to bend a tighter radius. And all of this allowed us to build our fan shroud in a nicer way than normal. Before getting this, I couldn't bend anything. Everything had to be welded. If I needed two pieces in a corner, I had to weld them. Time consuming, not that clean. So I was really excited to use it for this fan shroud assembly. We were able to use the brake to bend our sides here to give us our offset. However, the long run was too wide to fit in the brake. So what I had to do was just revert back to my normal methods and cut a strip out and then just weld it on all the way across. So this obviously goes on here. Now, the reason for the offset is to allow the fans to pull air through the whole parts of the core. If they were like basically touching the radiator, they'd only be pulling air on their footprint, whereas this offset allows them to pull air from every little part of it. We still got to mount it, but the reason I didn't mount it is because this radiator that I got from Mishimoto is just a mock-up radiator. So this is the radiator I wanted to use, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to fit it. I didn't want to take a nice, brand new, fresh radiator and cut it up and not be able to fit it. So luckily they had this damaged one in stock. They sent it to me, and I'm fairly confident that we're going to be able to make this work. We had to cut half this outlet off, and we're going to have to do some trickery, but I think all in all we can make it work. So I need to wait until I get the other radiator to do the mounts into the chassis and the shroud onto the radiator, because these points are going to move a little bit because this one got damaged and is bowed. So if I make the mounts to here and then the other radiator a little different, then the mounts will be off. So that was kind of our stopping point for the radiator. As much as I wanted to keep hammering out on that, it's kind of a waste until we get the new radiator in. So since we couldn't work on the radiator, I thought about moving on to the wiring. That's a big thing I want to get done. That's a big milestone in the project that needs to get handled. However, I still have a bunch of sensors I need to mount. I need to put in my intake air temp sensor. I need to put in my ethanol content sensor, my fuel pressure sensor, my oil temp sensor. There's a handful of sensors and things that are going to need to get wired up with everything else that are not in yet. The throttle body being the biggest one. We still don't have our throttle body in. That's on the way. We need that here before we can wire it up. So basically, I want to get everything that needs to be wired to in and in place before I start building the harness. Otherwise, I'm going to have to backtrack, cut it open, and add this stuff later. So instead of doing that, I was like, hey, we'll move on to another fab project. This is a fun one. This is a fun one. So, being that we're mounting the radiator way down here, we can't fill and bleed out the system. Now that radiator, which is part of why I wanted to use it, doesn't even have a radiator cap because it's meant to be mounted in situations like this. But let's say it did. Even if it did, the radiator is way lower than the highest point of the cooling system. So when you're filling it with water, you can't bleed out all the air because there's a bunch of coolant passages that go above the radiator. With a cooling system, you need wherever you fill from to be the highest point in the cooling system, because that way all the air can escape out of that highest point. So to remedy that, we need to build what's called an expansion tank. Now this isn't an overflow. An overflow is radiator cap opens, it overflows into a little tank. This is an expansion of our cooling system. This is going to be a pressurized part of our cooling system. Imagine it as a piece of the radiator. It functions the same way. Water flows into it and back out of it, circulates through it. It is under pressure, extension and expansion of the cooling system. So that was the next fab project. Again, really exciting and fun one, especially with the new tool. So we started out with some CAD, cardboard aided design. We got the basic shape kind of figured out and in position. Finally got the rough shape we were going for. So here is our CAD model. Now normally I would break this down into all 4 pieces. We have a front plate, a top plate, a side plate, and then I put them all together and weld them all up. That's the traditional method. But since we now have the brake, I was able to split them into 2 pieces. So we have the side plate and the front plate, and then the side plate and the top plate as 1 piece each. So 2 pieces instead of 4 pieces. So we put those in the brake, got them bent to the right angle, and then got them all in position and tacked together. Now this is cool because 2 pieces instead of 4 are a lot easier to fit up together with each other, because you're not trying to get 4 pieces all to be in the right plane and match with each other, and it's less welding. You're cutting out 2 really long welds. So once we got those tacked up, I had to build a little back plate for it, got that all tacked up, and then we were on to the hardest part, the part I was most concerned about. Now, when I built expansion tanks before, like in my Miata, I kind of built them straight. So basically it was flat, angle, flat, because I knew it would be hard to make this curvature with the thick material that I use for these expansion tanks. Like this is some really thick stuff. So without a bender, there was no chance. And even with the bender, you know, the bender is meant to make a bend, not a long radius like this. So what I did was made another CAD template, this one for the back here, and I realized that with 2 bends, it might be possible to match this curvature, because it's, you know, it's not that aggressive of a curvature. So we cut this out of our trusty dusty aluminum, put it in the brake, and I ended up doing 4 separate bends. And I was able to get the curvature I needed. That was such an exciting moment. I thought I was gonna have to go to a thinner gauge material and come up with some elaborate way to bend it to match the arc, but it dawned on me if I just cut it a little smaller so that it recesses in here, if it's a little tighter of a radius here and a little wider here, it'll all work out, and it's on the bottom anyway. Now if this was on the front and this was something you were gonna see all the time, you might wanna come up with a more elaborate way to do it, but for our purposes, it worked out perfect. Fit in nice and tight. So we got that all welded up, and then the overall box was complete. So from there, all we had to do was figure out where we wanted to put our AN fittings for our water inlet and outlet, and our radiator cap, get the holes drilled for that, get those tacked on, get those welded on, and then the general assembly was complete, only missing mounting brackets. So I made a couple of little tabs, which I, again, used the brake for to bend them to different radiuses, which this is one of those things, it's kind of like when I got my first welder. Before I got a welder, I couldn't think of that many projects I would use a welder for, because I'd never had one. I never had that option. So whenever I thought of how to make something, how to get from point A to point B, I never put welding into the equation because I couldn't weld it. Once I could weld, then everything was like, oh, I'll just weld this to this, or I'll weld a bracket with this little this, and then I can do this. And basically once I had the option, many more uses revealed themselves. And it was literally the exact same thing with this. I couldn't think of that many uses for it, but I knew it would be handy. And once I started using it, now that I have it, I mean, we used it so much on just the couple little projects alone. So anyway, bent the mounting tabs, got them in position, got them all tacked up, and boom! Here is the finished result. From cardboard to aluminum, this is our expansion tank. So the roughest parts on the bottom here, you can see, you know, the 4 bends. You can see how it's basically lower in the middle than it is on the top, and I just hammered through the welding on this. The rest of it, it fit up so good. I really took my time and tried to make sure, you know, the welds were relatively consistent and looked decent, and it welded really well. I made sure to clean it good, and it was the smoothest and best result aluminum welding project I've done to date, for sure, which I'm really happy about that. I mean, you know, the AN fitting welds came out nice. Like, everything came out pretty nice. The brackets, So overall, I am super happy with this thing. Being able to do this out of 2 pieces, the bulk of it, such a big difference. So yep, that's how we built the expansion tank, and that is where we're at. So we've got this thing mounted in. I need to do some rubber washers under the mounting tabs here, just to isolate it so we don't have to worry about the tabs cracking. And we do need to build like a 3rd mounting tab here. So we need to do that. And then again, we've got a couple other projects to take care of as well, but that's the bulk of what we've gotten done already while you guys were not here. You were over at someone else's house. You weren't hanging out here. You missed it, but you're all caught up. Let's get back to work. I still can't believe I did that. I still can't believe it, but it's good. We're caught up. You're caught up. It's good. Before we commit to the final mounting on this, we do need to check clearance. And for that, I have another surprise, something else you guys missed. It's pretty exciting. Check it out. Before I committed to V-mounting everything, I knew I would need a vented hood to make it all work. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to find one, but I found one for like 500 bucks shipped, and it's a pretty snazzy unit. Oh, we got miles of clearance. So this is it. So it's got big vent here, typical vent, but then it's also got this vent back here, like the kind of cowl section, which I really like. I think this looks really good. It's definitely really steps up the aggressiveness of the car. And again, it's a functional reason because the air is going to come in here, go through the radiator and divert up through the intercooler. It needs somewhere to go, and that somewhere is out through our vented hood. Now I was worried about clearance to the hood, but as you can see, we literally have like 1.5 miles. So we can run some pretty thick rubber washers and make sure that thing stays isolated and still have tons of clearance to the hood. And you can see, I mean, this hood overall gives us way more clearance to everything. Look at how much room we have above the engine, above the turbo. Clearance for days. So that's super exciting. I'm gonna go put this thing back before I damage it, but snazzy unit. All right, let's mount this thing up for good. This is why I buy bolts in bulk. I mean, I guess I could have got this when I just went to Ace, but it's nice to always have hardware when you need it. Oh, I do that every time. All right, got it all mounted up with the rubber bushings. Got it sitting nice and pretty much level. We need to do one more bracket just because with coolant in it hard under the brakes, can flop around. So we need a bracket to go from here to here. Let's get to cutting and bending. Alright, just a little bit more. Alright, we got our bend figured out. Gonna leave a little bit of room, the rubber bushing. Got another new tool coming that'll make rounding off edges easier, but for now, good old grinder will do. Alright, obviously this magnet does not work on aluminum, but it'll at least hold it in place while we get ready to tack it. Make sure it still fits. Alright, looks pretty good. If you guys hadn't been late, you would have seen a lot of this already. A whole lot of welding and fitting. All right, we just got to test fit it, let it cool down first off, test fit it back in with a center punch, mark our hole, drill our hole, then we can finalize the mounting. So we've got a transfer punch here that just marked our hole for us with a little tap of a hammer using the impact. See, there's our hole. All right, well, we finalized the mounting on this. I used bolts that weren't threaded all the way, so they bottom out before just crushing the bushing all the way. So everything's got some flex in it, but is really tight. We don't want this jiggling around too much with all the water in it. It's gonna have some weight to it. It's got some give. It's isolated with the rubber bushings everywhere. Boom, boom, done. So satisfying. That is one of the most satisfying projects I've ever done, I think. So still need to get a radiator cap, and then obviously we've got to plumb this in, but I got to get some fittings and lines and stuff to do that. But for now, we're done with this. We're done with the expansion tank. It is wrapped up. I'm super stoked. I said it already, but I just, oh, it's so satisfying. It looks so good. Definitely the best aluminum project I've ever done. So happy with how that came out. So, moving on. Since we're still waiting on the radiator, we can't really do that right now, but we do have the parts to finish up the fuel system. So far, geez Louise, I haven't even blown these leaves out because it's just, they're gonna blow right back in. I need to blow them out, they're bugging me. Anyway, we mounted our D-Works brushless pump in the fuel hanger assembly, got our AN fittings on the factory fuel hanger assembly, got our feed line ran to our filter, and then from our filter out, it comes up into the rail here. Through the rail, we got this nice 120, comes back into the D-Works regulator. Nice little 45 down right by the firewall and goes down, and that's pretty much where it ended because we were waiting on the fittings to incorporate an ethanol content sensor, which we now have. So we can route to the sensor, mount the sensor, from the sensor back to the tank, and be done and dusted with the fuel system. So let's get to work after I blow these leaves out. All right, so here's our return line. It's clamped to here. I want to put my content sensor somewhere right in here. I think the best move is going to be to mount the content sensor and then build the last two lines. All right, so we just got an OEM GM content sensor here. And of course, D-Works fittings, like we did with everything else. So these are pretty cool. They're O-ringed inside, already pre-lubed. And we'll just slide this on, thread this on, and we are adapted. Ta-da! Easy enough. So now we just need to build a simple little bracket to hold this old girl in place. Oh, look at that. We already got a strip cut the right width. We'll put a little bit of rubber on the bottom side here, just to keep it isolated. And then she's good to go, boys. Alright, content sensor's mounted, nice and tight. I put a piece of rubber on the top too, so it's pretty much completely rubber isolated. Probably doesn't need to be, but figured why not. Now we need to cut our line for our next fitting. Finally got a line cutter. After we're almost done, this will be my first time using it. Alright, now we just got to build the line from here all the way to the tank. For anyone who's worried about this being under the car, well above most things. All right, last line terminated. All right, we are officially done with the fuel system, aside from wiring in the pump, which we will do when we're wiring in everything else. So not really worried about that. Well, and wiring in the content sensor. So wiring two things. Other than that, fuel system is completely done. Return line into content sensor. Boom, goes here, bracket there, and then I double bracketed it, which looks really nice. I don't know why, I just like the way it looks. Bracket there, double there, tucked way up there, bracket there, and then into and out of the fuel hat. So that is a wrap for the fuel system. I would prime it up and see if we have any leaks now, but just in case I've got to take the intake manifold off or something, I'm gonna wait until we need fuel. And I really want to drain the tank out, so I'll probably pump it out pre the filter, just run the pump it out pre-filter, and then put some fresh gas in it. But I'm really happy with the progress, honestly. Fan shroud done, expansion tank done, fuel system done. Once we get the radiator, we'll be diving back into mounting that, mounting the intercooler, building the intakes, building the intercooler piping. We've got to build the exhaust, we got to do the wiring, and then that's pretty much it. There's really not much left, and it's all mostly like fun, cool, intricate stuff that I'm really excited about. So I can't wait to do all of it, but for now, we are out of time. This has been would have been a long video if you guys got here early enough, and I've got a lot of tires to mount. Got a bunch of new Koenig wheels for the Miata, got tires for the event coming up, and I want to get these all mounted so I save space not having wheels and tires in separate places. We got a lot of mounting to do. So anyway, long-winded way of saying, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.